Okay, guys, let's take a look at section 8.3 in your textbook and our notes on division and outbreak of war. A couple of things I want you guys to be able to do as we look at our essential question: why did the Civil War begin? You should be able to explain some of the issues that divided the nation. We're going to look at the issues in the North and the South. Then we're going to look at the strengths and weaknesses of each side as the war began. And then finally, I want to introduce just a few of the leaders, some of which you will be familiar as we get into the actual battles and moving of the war. We'll introduce a few more. So let's start with looking at the beginning of the war. We just finished up with the election of President Lincoln in 1860. Again, that led the South, particularly South Carolina, to succeed, as we talked about. Secession means to break away, so they decide to form their own Confederate states. We come to this point at Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. This is controlled by the Union. This is a Southern territory. And again, because their South broke away, they felt that this was a territory that the Union should occupy. And so they began to attack this fort under the leadership of the Confederate Army. They wanted Robert Anderson to surrender. He didn't want to surrender, and so fighting breaks out. And on April 13th, you see Fort Sumter begins to be bombarded, and some, as they looked onto it, particularly those in Charleston, saw it as fireworks because of the heavy artillery that was taken by Major Robert Anderson. And so, as the animation tells you, the country is now divided. And so we're going to look at why the South wanted to succeed or break away from the Union. The first was they believed that they had the right to leave the Union. They felt that each state could decide what they want to do for itself, particularly because the North, and we're going to talk a little bit about this later, wanted to really go against their way of life. They wanted to be independent. They want to preserve their way of life. We'll look in more detail when we look at the issue of slavery, which is the overarching cause of the Civil War, as you saw as we look at the causes. But just their way of life, their Southern way of how things went on a day-to-day basis, they felt threatened by it. So this was their position. The North's position, they were fighting this war to save the Union. Our founders have fought so valiantly against the British. They declared our independence. We formed the Constitution. One nation, and so the North felt that it was imperative that we stay together as a union. Abolition of slavery was not a goal, all right? At the beginning of the Civil War, it was not a major goal, so that's important to note that as we move along. Let's look at the decisions that the states had to make, all right? So you have 1861, you have 8 slave states that were still a part of the Union. Several had broken away. You have Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas, all who've already broke away and joined the Confederacy. But you had something called border states. Now, these are going to be crucial to the Civil War, and we'll look at this in detail when we do an activity in class. These border states, Kentucky, Missouri, Maryland, Delaware, they remain a part of the Union. Even though they're slaveholding states, they stay a part of the Union. Maryland is crucial, as you can imagine, just geographically because its proximity to Washington, D.C. So it's important for the Union to try and uphold Maryland as a part of the Union. Take a few moments, pause the video, and answer your first part of your essential question. What were some of the issues that divided the nation? Now that you had a chance to do it, take a look at this visual and kind of give you an idea of how the country is divided. From the North, the Union, in the South, the Confederacy. And so you can kind of see color-coded. We'll take a look at this and discuss this a little more in class as well. So the strengths and weaknesses of both the Confederacy and the Union. Let's start with the South, all right, and look at its strengths. As it fought, it was fighting a war of independence. It felt it had the right to break free, and so that was a strength when you're fighting for a cause that you truly believe in. Secondly, they were fighting a defensive war. The Union Army had to come to the South in order to engage them, and so they knew the territory and the terrain, and so that gave them a strategic advantage as well. Some of the weakness, though, there were a few factories. Remember, they were more of raw materials, cotton in particular, as we talked about, cotton becoming very important with the invention of the cotton gin and the Industrial Revolution that took place in Europe, and which was taking place as well in the North. They had few railroads, so when you think about transportation, we'll talk about that and look strategically how that really helped out the Union Army as they fought this war. And then lastly, political problems. We're going to look at Jefferson Davis as he becomes the new president of the Confederacy and talk about some of the turmoil that was going on in the South. So political problems helped or was a weakness for them. And then finally, population was an issue. They had 9 million people in the South versus 22 million in the North. And again, even though the South had a lot more slaves in the South than in the Union armies, we're going to see that this plays out a key part, not just sheer numbers in the Civil War. So the North's strengths. All right, first, they were 4 times as many free citizens as in the South. And so again, you had people who are willing to fight for their freedom, very industrious, had a lot of resources. Again, factories became a major issue. It had 70% of the rail lines or the railroads were in the North, so they could again move people and products and goods and weapons very easily. They had a navy that had developed and that was strong, which the South didn't, as they broke away from the North. Some of the weaknesses: the South was huge area to conquer. They were unfamiliar with this territory, so that we're going to see became a strategic disadvantage for the South. And then even though they had the rail lines, trying to take those supplies from one place to another lent itself at a disadvantage for the North. So take a look at this chart, observe it a little bit, and look at how the North and the South resources would play out a key role in the Civil War. We'll take a little bit closer look in class as well. All right, let's pause it, take a minute, describe some of the strengths and weaknesses of the South, write those down, and then we'll move forward to our last section, which we'll look at some of the leaders. The South's leaders, 2 major ones. You have Jefferson Davis, as I said earlier. He was more interested in being a soldier or fighting the war than being president, but he was elected as president of the Confederacy. And then Robert E. Lee, he is a unique figure. Originally, as we see the North's leader, Abraham Lincoln, he sought out Robert E. Lee, who at the time was one of the highly decorated generals in our country in particular. And so President Lincoln sought to have him help lead up the Union Army, but he could not see how he could go against his home state of Virginia, and so he embraced the Confederacy and led up their army. Later on, we're going to look at General Grant for the Union and his impact for that. So now that we've looked at our 3 essential questions, answer the last one here, identify some of the key leaders. And if you have any questions, write those down, and we'll discuss those further in class. Thanks, guys, and see you later.